go ahead and bring this meeting to order. Before we begin with the invocation and pledge, I do want to let folks who are watching at home know that we are following the guidance of the Sedgwick County Health Department in reopening our chamber to the public. In doing so, we would ask that folks stay 6 feet apart. We were intending to have, I think, Public Works come and mark the seats to ensure that people were far enough apart. It seems like everyone who's currently here is doing that. We also ask for folks to keep their masks on, even if they are further apart from someone next to them, because the ventilation in here is not, it does not give us the confidence that if there are droplets in the air that they are being ventilated fast enough. So for your safety and the safety of others around you, we ask to keep masks on when possible, even if you are sitting 6 feet away from someone. And we are glad to be back to have folks being able to be in our chamber and to utilize this space. And we appreciate, we hopefully we'll get where we're full functioning with more folks as the numbers continue to go down. But we do appreciate the folks who have been showing up at Century 2 and have been accommodating for us. So with that, we will have the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. So we ask folks, if you are willing and able to stand as we welcome Pastor Wilson from Pathway Church for the invocation.
God, thank you so much for today. God, thank you for the beautiful weather that you provided today. And God, we just pray for this time. God, we pray for the council as they continue to navigate challenges in this season. God, that you would give them wisdom and perseverance. God, we are grateful for the progress that we've made here recently, just getting to a safer place and a healthier place. And we give you all the glory for that. So God, I pray for this time. Pray for wisdom and discernment as the council meets. And again, we thank you for providing us with so many things that are good. And we love you. And we thank you most of all for your son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Clerk.
Approval of the minutes of the regular meeting on February 23rd, 2021.
Has every member had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, is there any discussion on the minutes? If there is no discussion on the minutes, then I will make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open a roll. Members cast a vote. Result of 6 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Public agenda, Sybil Strum, missing property.
Chair recognizes Ms. Strud.
Hello.
Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, my name is Sybil Strum. I reside at 326 North Walnut. I'd like to know where my missing stuff went. When they decided to tear down my house without me knowing and getting me a contractor without me knowing, I had a Victorian tub, 1910, and I had a white metal door in the front. And I want to know where those things went. Because after I found out from a neighbor of mine that they had a Central come in my house without permission and destroy my house without permission, because you're supposed to tell the homeowner what's going on. But I didn't get to know. I want to know where that stuff went. Because I also had a storm door on the side of my house. Storm door in the front, and a metal door, and a Victorian tub, which could have been, I could have got an antique dealer to come over and pick it up. But the Central has been a bully to me ever since I came back to Wichita, Kansas. Everywhere I went, they stalked me. They went and said things like, we're gonna tear your house down, we're gonna get you. And when my landlord, a long time ago, some of my landlords didn't want to fix the places up, I got stuck paying the bill. And I am so outraged that my stuff was stolen. I want to know where it went. Now, Mayor Whipple wasn't there when it happened. So, and Brandon, he tried to help me. But I want to know where that property went. Why didn't they knew where I was. Mark Stanberry of the Housing Authority knew where I was. But instead, I now have a loan of $20,000 from Fidelity, and I'm paying it little by little. This has to be stopped. This has to be stopped. You cannot take people's property. That's called theft. And when I alerted the police about it, I got told, well, that's Central for you. So help me find out what really happened to my stuff, because it was bad. I sat there going by the house and see my house destroyed. And then they give me a house that's got the front door, has cold air coming through the door, and windows are thin, and I've had to do plastic and weatherize my house myself. Tell me where my stuff went. That's what I want to know. Did they give it to somebody? They had no right. I was the homeowner, and they took their advantage of me. The Central has been a bully. I have come to this podium several times and told them that they've been bullies. And the Housing Authority, they had no right to make negotiations without me. This has been going on several times. I can't take it anymore. I've done stuff for the community. I've taught kids to read, write, do math. I've actually worked for the election board a long time ago, from 1984 to 2007. I've helped schools be funded without the taxpayers having to pay for it. I've done fundraisers because of God and Jesus. I want answers. Please, please give me why I was treated so badly. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda items 1 through 13.
Does every member had a chance to review the consent agenda? And if so, is there any discussion on the consent agenda? If there is no discussion on a consent agenda, then I will make a motion to pass the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. With a vote of 6 yeas to no nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Report of Board of Bids and Contracts dated March 1st, 2021.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council.
Good
Hannah Lake,
morning.
Department of Finance, here to present the March 1st Board of Bids recommendations. First engineering bid we have is Pine Street Water Main Replacement, McCall Excavation for $488,880. Mount Carmel Avenue, Legacy 3rd Edition Phase 4, Pearson Construction for $227,021.80. Waterline improvements near Fairmont Park, No Walk Construction for $570,015. Water distribution system Tide, Willow Creek East 3rd Edition Phase 2, McCall Excavation for groups 1 and 2 for an aggregate bid total of $132,625. Stormwater sewer number 410 to serve Tyler Point Edition, Apex Excavating for $33,099. 2021 OP3 CIP repairs Phase 1, Prado Construction, the contract has been awarded for $560,000. Paving on Anna Street, Pearson Construction for $256,576.75. Panasonic Tough Pads Turnkey Mobile for $52,382. This is our purchasing procurement website, as well as our current open request for proposals. That is the Board of Bids recommendations. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Is there questions of staff? See none. Bring discussion to the bench. Is there discussion on the item? There's no discussion on the item, then I will make a motion to accept staff's recommended action to receive and file the report, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and then seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. If there's no discussion on the motion, clerk will open a roll. Members cast the vote. The result of 6 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Petitions for public improvements.
Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The item before you this morning, petitions for public improvements. We have one revised petition for your consideration today. The petition does represent 100% of the improvement district and is valid per Kansas statute. On May 7th, 2019, the City Council approved a petition for paving improvements to Kellogg Crossing Addition, which is east of 127th Street East and south of Kellogg. The developer has now submitted a revised petition to include an adjacent portion of Country Hollow Second Edition. The budget remains the same. The improvement district is the only thing that changed. Staff recommends City Council approve the revised petition and the budget with the budget remaining the same. Adopt the amending resolutions and authorize the necessary signature. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for staff? If there is no questions, is there discussion on the item? If there's no discussion, then I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to approve the petition and budget, adopt the resolution, authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and then seconded by Vice Mayor Johnson. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. With 6 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
2021 Federal Legislative Agenda.
Welcome and good morning.
Morning, Mayor, Council. I'm Jim Jonas, Director of Communications for the City of Wichita. I'm here to present on the 2021 Federal Legislative Agenda. As you know, each year the City of Wichita develops a legislative agenda that guides the actions and focus of the city's contract lobbyists in Washington, D.C. We had a workshop last week on February 23rd with Jim Davenport of Thorn Run Partners, who represents the city's interests in D.C. This year's agenda identifies a few key federal issues and policy areas that the city seeks to address and monitor throughout the year. Those priorities are and include Wichita North Junction, the Amtrak extension, water supply equals beds, clean water infrastructure, public housing improvements, transport ozone pilot program, broadband service, and federal funding for city services. It also, Jim in DC is paying attention to any opportunities that may arise around federal funding for COVID relief as well. With that, staff recommends that Council approve the 2021 Federal Legislative Agenda.
Are there questions or discussion about the agenda? Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to verbalize a citizen reached out and asked us to support criminal justice reform, and I told him I'd mention it at the council meeting.
Thank you.
Further discussion or questions? See none. With that, I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to approve the 2021 Federal Legislative Agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and then seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open a roll. Members cast the vote. The result of 6 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Public hearing and resolution of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds, Rand Graphics, Inc.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development for the record. The item before you today is a request for an industrial revenue bond letter of intent for Rand Graphics. Rand Graphics was founded in 1966 to provide point-of-sale advertising displays. The company has small and large printers that can print on vinyl, rigid vinyl, plastic, and conventional paper. 90% of its products are shipped outside of the state of Kansas. These are just some examples of some of the products that they print. The item on the left, the Gatorade item, is a stand-up display. Next to that is a set of pennants. And then next to that with the Spam-A-Lot is a window cling. And then finally on the far right there is a banner. Again, these are just some examples of some of the products that they manufacture. The company currently occupies 340,000 square feet between two facilities here in Wichita. One is located at 500 South Florence, which is largely office space, and then 2820 South Hoover Road by the airport is largely manufacturing space. The company is intending to add 20,000 square feet to its facility on Hoover Road to accommodate a new large printer. In this aerial, you can see Hoover Road is running north and south, basically through the middle of this aerial. You can see K-42 coming in at an angle. On the left side of this aerial, you can see Textron Aviation's Cessna Wallace facility at the airport and I-235 on the right side of this aerial. The area outlined in red is where the facility at 2820 South Hoover Road is located. You can see there is some ground on the south end of that facility, which is where the addition will be. The company is requesting a letter of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $4 million. The company is projecting that it will invest approximately $1.3 million in real property improvements and an additional $2.7 million in machinery and equipment. Rand Graphics currently employs 199 people in Wichita and projects it will add at least 6 new people over the next 5 years with annual average wages of $42,000 a year. Based on the capital investment, job growth, and being in the advanced manufacturing sector in the regional growth plan, the company qualifies for an 80% property tax abatement. No land will be abated as part of this project. The value of an 80% property tax abatement based on the $1.3 million being invested in real property improvements is approximately $24,200 for all taxing jurisdictions, with the city's share of that being approximately $6,800 a year. A cost-benefit analysis was completed by the Center for Economic Development and Business Research at Wichita State University, which showed an overall ratio of benefits to costs of 1.39 to 1 for the city, 1.27 to 1 for the city's general fund, and 1.49 to 1 for the city's debt service fund. Therefore, it's staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing, adopt the resolution of intent, and authorize the necessary signatures. Randy Votravers, who is the president of Rand Graphics, and Phil Seaman, who is the controller for Rand Graphics, are here and can answer any questions specific to the company, and I would be happy to stand for any questions as well.
Councilmember Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Tim. Thank you. Could you just verify for me, is that minimum annual salary or average salary? On a green
That is a
sheet, it says
minimum.
minimum.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Tim, under our former economic development policy, would this have qualified?
It would have qualified, but the percentage of abatement would have been substantially lower. Based on what they're investing in the job creation today, based on the job creation, they will qualify for 30%. Based on the investment, they're qualifying for 40%. And the fact that they're in a regional growth plan sector, advanced manufacturing, they qualify for an additional 10%, which gets them to 80%. Under the previous policy, I couldn't tell you specifically what they would have qualified for, but it would have been well below 50% that they would have qualified for.
So this is another business that's going to benefit from an improved policy that we.
Correct.
Further discussion? See none. With that, I will make the motion to take staff's recommended action to close the public hearing, adopt the resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second? Councilmember Bluebock.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take the opportunity to speak and thank them for making their capital investment. Thank Rand Graphics for making your capital investment in District 4. And I'm excited to see the employment growth and see that you guys are doing everything you can to grow your company. So thank you very much.
Councilmember, we are still looking for a second, if you wanted to
Second.
retain the floor. Motion has been made and seconded by Councilmember Bluebock. If there's no discussion on the motion, members cast a vote. With a result of 6 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
2021 Traffic Signalization Program.
Welcome.
Good morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. I've got 3 items for you this morning. The first being the 2021 Traffic Signalization Program. The adopted capital improvement program includes an ongoing project to signalize major intersections and improve the traffic signals at existing signalized intersections. So when we look at new traffic signals across the city, it's mostly driven by development in certain areas. We try to keep an eye on traffic counts, crash data in particular, working with Wichita Police Department. Some of these areas come to light because of obvious issues, safety issues. Also, there's a lot of factors that go into warranting signals, including pedestrian activity, proximity to schools. There's 8, 9 different warrants that we look at kind of as an industry standard to see where traffic signals should be installed. So this annual funding helps for the city portion of the funding. Sometimes, and I'll talk about each of the 3 that are on the list here today, it makes sense for us to have a cost sharing, splitting funding with the development, which happens to be the case with all 3 of these today. So the locations that we're looking at for 2021 for the available funding, starting down in the bottom left, is I-235 and K-42. That is part of a bigger project. Jeff Lang Real Estate submitted a application for cost share funding to KDOT, and which in the city was a partner to that, which the city council previously approved. Our commitment to that project is $100,000, which would come from this budget to make improvements to the traffic signals at the southbound ramp terminal, which those are City of Wichita signals. The project primarily, and I'll be presenting this project itself to the City Council on March 16th, so not to take a lot of your time on that, but we'll make improvements on K-42. This is a good commitment from the city as far as partnering with private development. That's what the cost share program was about with KDOT. Overall, the total budget is $900,000, so the city's contribution to that would be $100,000 from this budget. Moving to the upper left at Ridge and Village Circle, this is on Ridge Road just south of K96. Currently, there's Quick Trip on the west side. Wygan's building a new office on the east. There's considerable development happening in the area, and a traffic signal is warranted at this time. We think, looking at the improvements that are needed, that it makes sense for this project to be split right down the middle. And the City of Wichita contribute 50%, and the area development contribute 50%. And we've done that in quite a few areas. If it looks like it's contributing to more than just direct development growth, there's some factors that we look at. I think it makes sense on this one to do that too. The estimated total project cost is $350,000. So the City of Wichita will be responsible for $175,000, and area development would be the balance of the same. Moving northeast to 21st Street, just west of Rock Road, we're proposing a signal at 21st and Broadmoor. To the south is proposed apartment complexes and additional residential housing that's going to drive the traffic counts to the point of warranting a signal at this location. We also are proposing a 50-50 split on the cost of this one because there's some existing development and some other things going on along 21st Street that we think that it will benefit more than just that development, so it makes sense for the city to contribute to this one also. And I think the total cost there was around $150,000, so we'd be splitting that 2 ways also. Remaining funds, if there are, will be used for additional sites as requested by the public or identified by staff when warrants are met. So the adopted capital improvement program includes $750,000 in 2021 for this work. The funding source is general obligation bond, and staff is requesting that budget to be initiated at this time. Staff recommends City Council approve the revised budget and adopt the resolution. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for staff? Discussion or comments on the item? See none, thank you. With that, I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to approve the revised budget and adopt the resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk open the roll, members cast the vote. The result of 6 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Funding for Intelligent Transportation Systems and Change Order Limit Adjustment, ITS.
Welcome back.
Mayor and council members, again, Gary Jansen. The next item I have for you is funding for Intelligent Transportation Systems. And as this project is ready to move construction, part of this item is also to approve a change order limit adjustment for staff level authority. There's quite a bit on this slide. I apologize, we probably should have spread this out, but the capital improvement program includes biennial funding every 2 years for optimization of traffic signals across the city. Improvements are aimed at increasing vehicular and pedestrian mobility and safety, particularly in the downtown area and along critical corridors outside of the city's core. We spent some time over the last 2 years with this funding since it's been in place to work on a pilot project with IT on West Maple. To optimize that corridor. We learned a lot from there that we were using going forward as far as types of technology, equipment, things that did work, things that didn't work. And we've also had the opportunity to do some work with Sedgwick County and KDOT, which I'll talk about in just a moment, that we're now really ready to move forward. And having this funding every 2 years is going to be really helpful to continue on. We've also had the opportunity to get some funding through WAMPO and KDOT, which I will also talk about in a minute. But it's going to really help us continue to focus on the core area, Central Business District. I'll talk about a few specific projects. And once we can get to that point, I think this will start moving a little quicker than it has in the past. Projects typically include installation of pedestrian push buttons and vehicle detection, communication system enhancements, expansion of the fiber network, or through cellular modems, again, for communication, and new traffic signal controllers, which are really the brains of the traffic signal system and allows us to communicate with them and to coordinate those with each other. An optimized signal network allows for the coordinated and efficient progression of vehicles and pedestrians, as well as the ability to remotely monitor for and troubleshoot malfunctions, which eases the strain on maintenance staff and allows for quicker diagnosis of issues. As our traffic signal system stands right now, generally rely on the public to let us know when there's a problem. We can respond fairly quickly, but with moving forward with a more of an automated system, better remote communication, we can diagnose those issues a lot quicker and be able to take care of them without necessarily having to dispatch somebody to that location. So some quick background. In September of 2018, City Council approved funding for a study of the downtown core area. This is also when we started looking at the pilot project on West Maple. In March of 2019, additional funding was approved for the Central Business District, and that primarily was to help support around $1 million that we received through WAMPO for a fiber optic project, working with Sedgwick County and KDOT. That project is now complete. It completed a loop system for KDOT's dynamic message signs on the highway and ties into the Emergency Operations Center. So what that allowed is we'll be able to have up to 25 of our signals tied to that fiber optic network, which is going to provide for much more reliable communication. Then in July of 2020, the City Council approved the initial funding for the focus project that we're discussing today. So there's 3 places that we plan to utilize this funding. The first being the priority corridor along Douglas from McLean to Hydraulic. The project spans 1.5 miles and will include 13 traffic signals. Improvements will include signal controller upgrades, pedestrian push buttons, remote communications, and vehicle detection as needed. Most of our downtown area is set on timers right now. There is no actuation for vehicles or pedestrians. Everything is pre-timed, so what happens in a lot of areas, you'll see a red light with nobody there, whether it's vehicles or pedestrians. And what that can unfortunately lead to is people wanting to run red lights because there are certain areas you just don't see a lot of pedestrians. This will allow those lights to respond to the need of both vehicles and pedestrians, creating a safer environment and much more efficient travel. Design is nearing completion. The construction plans are anticipated to be ready soon. After we complete work on Douglas, additionally, we had made recent improvements to Waco from Douglas to Central, but we lacked funding at the time for vehicle detection equipment, so we would move there next if funding is available. We made some pretty big improvements, converting Waco from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, adding some equipment for pedestrian actuation, made it a lot safer for the interaction for pedestrians and vehicles. And this last piece of it will really optimize that full corridor. And finally, with some of the funding I talked about earlier, we had already made improvements along Main Street corridor from Murdoch to Waterman, replacing the traffic signal controllers, creating a lot more efficiency on timing and coordination of those signals. If funding allows, we will continue that south to Kellogg and a little bit east along the frontage road there so that we can fully optimize that corridor also. And again, that's if the funding's available. So the existing budget is $2,250,000. Each of those 3 dates I previously mentioned, the City Council approved $750,000 each time. Current CIP includes $1,500,000 in 2021. Pending your approval today, that will bring the total budget to $3,750,000. So with that, I know it's a lot of information. Staff recommends City Council approve the budget, adopt the amending resolution, also change order modification resolution because of the size of this project, and authorize the necessary signatures. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for staff? Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Gary, it's been said that you can get anywhere in Wichita in 19 minutes. So will this reduce us down to 18 maybe?
Well, that's a good question. I think it can, depending on where you're driving. But if we can stay on Douglas all the way through town, then I think we can get to 18, yes, sir.
There we go.
Other comments or discussion? If there's no further discussion, then I will make the motion to take staff's recommended action to approve the budget, adopt the amending resolution, change the modification resolution, authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. Result of 6 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Design concept from McLean Boulevard, Central to 13th Street North.
Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. Again, Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The last item I have for you this morning is a design concept for McLean Boulevard from Central to 13th Street North. And I'll talk about this at the end. We do not have construction funding currently identified. We were hoping to get City Council's approval for the design concept today so we can move forward with that. I will tell you that it dawned on me while I was sitting in the audience looking at this map that I expanded this yesterday when I was looking at this, and everything that's on the overlay did not expand with it, so I'm not going to spend much time on this, but it was intended to show kind of what the current land use is. But just so you're oriented, Central's on the left, 13th's on the right. I think everybody's familiar with this corridor of McLean that follows the river. The river is all the way on the east side. Down by Central's assisted living, there's primarily residential with apartments. There's a church in there, Indian Hills Pool, and then you get residential again at 13th Street. So we've had some history on this corridor, working with the neighborhood, especially at 9th Street, working with the Wichita Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board. The Bicycle Master Plan recommends looking at a pedestrian crossing at 9th Street. And then I'll talk about some more details in a minute. And we also, through some traffic study, noticed that there were some relatively higher speeds than we normally see along the McLean corridor that kind of drove us to start taking a deeper look at this. And we've been engaged with Councilmember Claycomb throughout this, with certain residents in the area, and again, Bike Ped Advisory Board's been heavily involved in this. So in August of last year, the City Council approved funding to complete a traffic analysis of this corridor. The purpose of the study was to evaluate traffic calming measures along McLean from Central to 13th as a result of higher than expected average speeds. I mentioned that the Bike and Ped Advisory Board has requested a pedestrian crossing near 9th Street. The design concept you will see today was approved by the Bike Ped Advisory Board in December of last year and District 6 Advisory Board on February 1st of this year. So the map on the right, Central's at the bottom, 13th is at the top. You can see the blue line is McLean, effectively following along the west side of the river. Just to talk about some quick data, average daily traffic counts on McLean are 14,000 vehicles. That's total vehicles in both directions. With everything being generally built out in the area, we would not assume a major increase on most of our streets across the city. As the city continues to grow in certain areas, we will see some nominal increases. Not really sure what will happen here, but that's a good number to start with. 9th Street is just over 2,000 vehicles per day. There's been a lot of questions asked over time by the residents near 9th Street about why we don't install a traffic signal at 9th Street. As I talked with the first item today, there's some very specific warrants that we follow, and a traffic signal today is still not warranted at 9th Street. As we've talked in the past, there are some issues with installing a traffic signal where it's not warranted, and it can actually create more problems than not and become a fairly significant liability issue for the city if we don't do that the right way. So this is going to look at an alternative to that. We look at level of service of all of our major streets in particular, and it's a scale that runs from A to F. From a congestion standpoint, the McLean is operating a level of service C all the way through the corridor and at Central and 13th, which is good. We look at speed data. We've talked before about the 85th percentile, which means all traffic, 85% of the traffic is going that speed or less. That's the speed, that's the industry standard for which speed limits are set. Speed limit along McLean is 40 mile an hour. The 46 mile an hour that we saw here is higher than we see on most corridors. In fact, we had one period of time when it was approaching almost 50 miles an hour. That became probably as alarming for us as anything. Typically, when we look at 85th percentile speeds on most of our major corridors, we'll see that within about 3 mile an hour of the posted speed limit. So this is higher. I think that has a lot to do with the McLean following the river. Obviously, southbound, there's no left turns because there's no points of access on the east side. One of the things you look at in road design, if you want to provide traffic calming, is to build curves in the road. Well, the river curves here are too long, quite frankly, and so it drives really nice. So those curves here really don't slow people down, and so that's why we're looking to do something here to provide some other level of traffic calming. If we look at crash data, this has been something that's the neighborhood has discussed quite a bit. It's part of the traffic signal warrants. I'm not going to go through this in detail. We're working closely with the Wichita Police Department. Our staff puts together crash diagrams. Over the course of 5.5 years at 9th Street, there were 11 collisions. That's a very low crash rate, not in our mind any cause for alarm. There was one fatality in late 2019 related to very high speed and losing control. So those are kind of hard to deal with, and there's really not much you can do to respond to an incident like that. But we did evaluate traffic data specifically at 9th Street, including crash data, and we still don't see the need to put in a traffic signal there. So what we're recommending, and we've done this in other areas of the city, is looking at a road diet and going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. Now, if you look at that diagram on the right and you see a 2-way left turn lane, you would think that that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense because, as I mentioned, for southbound McLean, there are no left turns. However, this does benefit northbound. There's a significant amount of left turns, and it does multiple things, including the benefits. So federal highway guidance says this works pretty well with the current traffic counts that we have, with the daily volumes. The benefits of what this does is studies have shown it lowers average speeds. It lowers the average speeds, reduction in top-end speeders, and a considerable reduction in overall crashes. It provides the opportunity to install pedestrian refuge islands, which I'll talk about in a minute, possible bicycle lanes, which we do not plan to do here because we've got the river path directly adjacent, on-street parking if that was desired, and transit stops. And this leads us to looking at more of a complete street environment, which is our goal on all of our projects. One of the things I talked about was the desire for pedestrian crossing. So we had staff go out in the last year and spend about 12 hours out there just manually getting pedestrian counts at 9th Street. And I think there was, I'm going to lose track of the number now, I apologize. It wasn't a significant number of pedestrian crossings, but you got to remember there is no signal, there is no safe crossing there now. We have reason to believe if there was somewhere in this vicinity that you would get a lot more pedestrian connection. Bicycle master plan I mentioned talks about a connection here. If you go back west on 9th Street, you connect to the path that's along Zoo Boulevard and considerable residential areas. So we do think that the pedestrian activity will increase if a crossing is provided. The 2 yellow stars show potential locations. The one north of 9th Street has better sight distance. That is what we are recommending. South of 9th Street is near the bus stop and the apartments, because where it happens to be on the curb, we don't think that would be as safe. So getting to the proposed concept, this is a little bit hard to see, but you see in the top half is 9th Street around the middle. It shows that northbound left turn being introduced to 9th Street. Just to the right of that, and I should have probably separated this out differently, you can see where we would have the proposed crossing where those white dash lines are. That allows us the ability to build a median in there and provide a pedestrian signal for that crossing. And then we've got that gore area hatched out there. The first phase of this project, we plan to restripe to 3 lanes and install this signal. And then in the future, one of the things that we can do as funding is available is to build more medians along the corridor. That does several things to add to the traffic calming, and we also have the opportunity to provide some beautification and create more of a boulevard. So from a financial perspective, in August of last year, again, the City Council approved just over $49,000 in neighborhood improvement funds to complete the analysis that you've seen today. As I mentioned, construction funding has not been identified at this time. Approval of design concept will allow staff the opportunity to develop a refined cost estimate, which we think will be around $350,000, and evaluate options for funding approval by the City Council at a later date. So with that, staff recommends the City Council approve the design concept, and I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for staff? Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Gary, that crosswalk build out, will that be similar to the one on, it's like 17th and Woodlawn?
It would be, or the one at 17th and Ridge. We've also got one on East Central near Prost where the box development is.
Okay.
We've got a variety of pedestrian type signal crossings. I didn't want to get into a lot of detail and bore you with that, but it would be similar to that, yes, sir.
Okay. I think that's good just because of when you hit the button, the lights are bright and then you can see people there. That should be safer. So.
I think so. And so just real quick, I talked before about 9th and McLean not warranting an actual true traffic signal. One of the dangers of that is if you put in a traffic signal at 9th and McLean and it's not warranted for the vehicular activity, even when you've got pedestrians there, that exceeds drivers' expectations, and you have a higher incident possibly between vehicle and pedestrians. Whereas if you have a separate pedestrian crossing with that type of actuation, it's shown that it will catch drivers' attention better.
Yeah.
Other questions or discussion? See none. Thank you, Gary. Further discussion from the bench? See none. With that, I will make the motion to take staff's recommended action to approve the design concept and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second? Councilmember Claycomb, excuse me. I keep looking at your name thinking you're vice mayor, but I have to make that happen.
Yes, I just wanted to make a few comments. This is Gary, thank you for the presentation. I know that we're worked through many iterations of this. This is a great example of where residents came to city staff and to me and advocated that we do something in this corridor. And we suggested that they work with the Bicycle and Ped Advisory Board, and they did. And Bike and Ped made a recommendation, went to DAB, the Bike Walk Wichita got behind this. It was really emphasized by folks that it was difficult for pedestrians and bicyclists to get across to the river path, which they really wanted to use. And so I think this is a great example of that, and I just wanted to thank residents and staff for the hard work on this. And we'll get to that construction budget someday, right? Thank you.
And I apologize, I should have given you the floor for the motion because this does fall into District 6, but you currently have the floor if you would like to make the second. Apologies, sometimes I miss those notes on my form here. Motion's been made and seconded. Clerk will open the roll, members cast their vote. The result of 6 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Quarterly financial report for the year ended December 31st, 2020.
Chair recognizes Mr. Mark Manning.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mark Manning with the Department of Finance. Today I want to go over the fourth quarter of 2020 financial report. Maybe the day that we thought we'd never get here, we can look at 2020 in the rearview mirror today.
Amen.
So just a reminder, the quarterly report reports unaudited activity, in this case through December 31st of 2020. We'll use that data and we'll look at what we expected to happen. In this case, that lens is the 2020 revised budget. And then finally, we'll take our experience in 2020 and we'll look forward and we'll look at what we might expect to happen in 21 and 22 based on our experience in 2020. So a couple key points I'll leave you with here before I start is to state the obvious. 2020 was a very, very unprecedented and dynamic year, at least from a financial standpoint. You may recall that earlier in the year we made some adjustments and reduced general fund revenue budget by about $13 million. CARES Act funding played an important role in our performance in 2020, as did, as importantly, were a number of strategic adjustments. Those helped stabilize the general fund. And finally, on the revenue side, we had good experience in 3 areas, one of which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail in a few minutes, and that's sales tax, interest earnings, and court revenues. So let's go back to maybe the March and April timeframe about what we expected in 2020 when the pandemic began. We knew that public safety would continue to be our priority, but we also had some recommendations to lower expenditures strategically. We also implemented some recommendations that would slow down hiring on a strategic level, focusing on, again, non-public safety areas. We expected revenues to be reduced, and we knew that we had to decrease expenditures, particularly in areas with lower activity, i.e. park programs and the convention center and areas of that in that category. And finally, we expected some revenue reductions due to economic activity decreases because our presumption at the time was that we would see a dip in economic activity, so we were preparing our modeling based on that assumption. And finally, you'll recall back in the March-April timeframe, CARES Act funding was a significant unknown that drove some of our decision making. So let's look at how we wound up in 2020 on the expenditure side. You may recall that we have a 2020 revised budget in the neighborhood of $242.5 million. We wound up underspending that by a little bit north of $5 million. This graphic shows you, though, that most of that under expenditures were in other expenditure areas not related to public safety. In other words, we spent most of our budgeted amount in public safety. I should probably also point out another nuance in 2020 that you'll probably notice when you peruse the quarterly. You may recall that City Council took action in December when we did know the CARES Act amount, and we shifted about $12 million in fire department expenditures to the CARES Act. So that's kind of a different anomaly that you'll see in 2020. So that's what happened on the expenditure side. Again, most of the under expenditure areas were, again, primarily due to activity-based areas and due to turnover savings and savings due to the hiring freeze. And again, we've talked about that quite a bit in the past, and we had provided information, at least in the third quarter report, that we were seeing significant savings in those areas. So let's flip over to the revenue side. You can see the bottom line there is we were incredibly close on our revenue estimate. We were about $200,000 different, which is pretty minute. But let's drill down a little bit more in detail and look at some of the things that happened. I have circled sales tax there. That was by far our biggest surprise, and fortunately it was a surprise on the good side. We've talked a lot about this in the past, but we really expected a significant decline in sales tax. And we weren't alone. That's basically what all the guidance was when the pandemic first hit. We were pleasantly surprised that that did not occur. And in fact, we exceeded our expectations by about $2.2 million. That's a really good thing that I'll talk about when we look forward here in a couple of slides, but just keep that in mind. We also performed a little bit better on court revenues or fines and penalties, as I noticed, or as I noted earlier, and our interest earnings exceeded our expectations. Interest earnings is a little bit maybe misleading, though, because we do expect interest earnings to drop in the future. So here's our summary. Again, you may recall that we expected to deficit spend by about $1 million in 2020, and we actually came out about $4 million to the good in 2020. So we performed pretty well and exceeded our expectations. So let me transition away from the general fund and talk about a couple of other areas real quick. I wanted to focus on the golf fund because we spent a lot of time in the past talking about the golf fund. Rounds in 2020 actually were up about 8% in the golf fund, and revenue was up about 4%. And on the other side of the ledger, expenditures were down about 13%. Expenditure decreases were primarily due to the fact that we had 4 courses in 2020 compared to 5 in most of 2019, and also due to strategic expenditure adjustments that were recommended and implemented by golf staff. So the golf fund actually performed with a net margin of close to $500,000 in 2020. That compares to about $50,000 in 2019. And I'll also remind you, in 2019, the general fund provided some support to the golf system as well. That did not occur in 2020. So what happened to turn around the golf system? The short answer is, I think that the pandemic actually worked in the favor of the golf system in the third and the fourth quarter. And so the big question is that level of play sustainable into the future? So I prepared this little graphic to try to illustrate what I was talking about. And we've mentioned this before. Most of the golf activity happens in Q2 and Q3. That's when they make most of their net margin, and they're lucky to break even or actually lose money in the first and fourth quarter. You know, the first and fourth quarter, it gets dark early and it's cold, not exactly ideal golfing conditions. But what happened in 2020 is really way outside the box, something we have not seen before. So if you look at the, I think it's the green bar there, the second one from the right, you can see in the third quarter of 2020 how much taller that bar is than the third quarter of 2019. That's about 10,000 rounds. That was excellent performance. But even more astounding is the fourth quarter bar. We exceeded Q4 in 2019 by about 15,000 rounds. That, like I said, that's just unprecedented. I cannot stress enough how unexpected that was. And that's basically how golf managed to turn a $500,000 net margin in 2020. Again, our guidance that we would have provided to you earlier in the second quarter report was that the position of the golf fund was in really bad shape. Now I'm here telling you that they turned a $500,000 profit in 2020. So this basically tries to explain the reason why. Again, the big question going forward is, was that play that occurred in Q4 and Q3 sustainable? We do not know the answer to that. Time will tell. We'll obviously be watching Q1 very closely, but that'll dictate the condition of the golf fund going forward. Transit guest tax, we'll touch on it briefly. We've talked about this in the past, so I won't spend much time. But revenues were down about 24%. That's what we expected. Actually, they actually performed slightly better than what we expected. T-bid revenues were down considerably more. The difference there is there's a longer lag time in the transit guest tax revenue. So what that tells us is Q1 for the transit guest tax will probably not be a good quarter for the transit guest tax fund. I will point out, though, that the balances in the transient guest tax fund did increase, and that was primarily due to lower than budgeted transfers out. So let's look at our debt profile real quick here. Won't spend a whole lot of time on this. It's very similar to what you've seen in the past. We like to show you this slide every time. I actually have a typo there. Our GO debt actually ended at 60.0 million, not 65.0 million. Apologize for that. So our GO debt was about 60 million. That's about 6% of our total debt. GO debt's important because that's the portion of our debt that's paid back through property taxes. Very small piece of our entire debt pie. Overall, our bonded debt at the end of the year was about $990 million. For perspective, that's about 30 million less than what it was 1 year ago. Most of those reductions primarily were in local sales tax, special assessments, and again, GO at large. Those were the areas decline. Now, debt levels, rise and fall based on our capital financing needs, but they actually decreased last year. Okay, so let's pivot and look forward with that background. So this page is showing you what you would have seen in our adopted budget that was adopted in August. So this represents our most recent attempt to provide a financial plan. And I have included the 2020 actual experience. So our model in August was to expect deficits going forward. And the simple reason there is because typically our organic expenditure growth exceeds our organic revenue growth. We've talked a lot about that in the past and the issues with our revenue portfolio, but that's generally speaking why you see structural deficits going forward. So let's talk about some things that may impact that forecast. So what are some of the good things? Sales tax, that is a very good thing. We had presumed a much lower base in our modeling in August. That base should be about $2 million higher than what we had presumed in August. Again, so we'll grow on a $2 million basis, $2 million higher. That's a very, very good thing. We took a very conservative posture in the budget as far as property valuation growth. Again, we had reasons for doing that. The county has not provided official guidance, but we have received some indications from the county that valuation, particularly in 2021, may not be quite as low as what we had expected it to be. We won't know for sure until June, but suffice to say that may break on the good side for us, which again would be very beneficial to the general fund. And the final thing I'll point out as far as the tailwind is health insurance growth. We typically budget 8% a year for health insurance growth and have for quite a few years. We visited with our consultant. They've examined our experience over the last several years, and we think based on our experience that maybe a expenditure growth assumption of closer to 6% in the future might be more realistic. So again, that will probably save us some money, at least from a budgeting standpoint for our health insurance. So those are the tailwinds. Let's look at some of the things that kind of concern us looking forward. I mentioned interest earnings. There's no doubt about it, interest earnings are dropping. If you look at what, we use the T-bill as our benchmark. The T-bill right now is at, 8 basis points. A year ago, it was at, 1.5%, so significantly lower. So we know interest earnings will decline. We have modeled that in, but the point I'd make here is we have maybe not modeled it in quite to the degree that we think it'll occur. Activity-based revenues, I talked about that earlier. The big question here is when will that activity return and how will that impact both our revenue and expenditure side? That's kind of a significant unknown. Bargaining unit costs, salaries and wages are 75% of the general fund, so our bargaining unit agreements drive that largely. We have contracts that are up in 2021 and 2022, so the resolution of those contracts obviously will have an impact on our forecast going forward. And finally, I'm going to mention health insurance again. I talked about how our growth assumption will probably be lower, but even in that, we have an expenditure amount in the general fund that's around $28 million that we expect to grow about 6% a year. Again, we don't have a revenue growing at 6% a year, so that's part of the structural challenges that we have. So we may want to try to review our health insurance program and see if there's anything that we can do to try to mitigate growth in that area. So some takeaways. Again, the City Council took a lot of very strategic actions in 2020 that enhanced our reserves and should provide a lot of flexibility going forward. So that is very fortunate. Our base models, as I mentioned, remain conservative, which is also good, but I will tell you that we do not model an economic pullback. So if we have any unexpected economic distress in our local economy, that would be a challenge for us. And finally, as I noted, health insurance expenditures and wage costs are generally what's going to drive our forecast in the future. So, very good year financially, at least in 2020. Why did we perform so well? The CARES Act helped us out, and the strategic adjustments that were made were instrumental in our performance in 2020. Sales tax revenue also was a significant positive. Looking forward, I would tell you that the guidance is mixed. There's some good things looking forward. There's some challenges. We're in the process of refining our estimates and should have those available in the near future. At this point, I would tell you that I would expect them to be relatively close to our previous guidance, which is to say not nearly as challenging as what we went through last year, but we still should have some challenges ahead. Finally, I'll close on golf. Again, Golf Fund performed very well in 2020, no question about that. The big question is that performance sustainable? There's a couple schools of thought there, but what I've read in the literature and talking to the experts I've talked to, there's some question as to whether that level of play will be sustainable in the future if and when the pandemic is curtailed. And so we'll definitely be watching that very carefully. We'll point out that the quarterly report is available on the internet. Will be shortly, as soon as this presentation is finished. And the recommended action is to receive and file the quarterly financial report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. You took my thunder away for asking for that to be online. I just wanted to thank you and your team and Bob for all your hard work on this and really guiding us through that unprecedented year and being in the type of position we're in now. And I've talked to Bob a little bit about this, but I've had a couple meetings with some folks about healthcare opportunities and looking to explore that. I'm not an expert in that, so I won't jump into it, but it seems really promising to maybe reduce the burden on the city of Wichita. So love to have that conversation and see if that can help out. But thank you again. This is really great.
Further questions? So Mark, just to clarify, when we made the adjustments in the budget to account for, sorry, my emergency weather alert's going off here.
Mayor, that's a test.
That's a what?
That's a test.
That's a test?
Yes.
Okay.
Please disregard it.
Not sure if we should be concerned about that. Thank you, Mr. Manager. We were able to cut the budget in anticipation of this COVID economy. I think you mentioned that we were looking to deficit spend about $5 million, and now we are actually $4.4 million in the black. Go ahead and vocalize your response. Yes. Okay.
Actually, Mayor, it was $1 million deficit in the general fund that we anticipated.
So we anticipated $1 million,
right.
And because of factors particularly pertaining to CARES Act money that we were able to utilize, as well as a surprise in the amount of sales tax revenue coming in, that allowed us to be up about $4 million instead of down about $1 million.
Yes, I think that's a perfect summary, Mayor. You're correct. We initially expected $1 million deficit this year, and due to probably three primary factors: the adjustments that were approved by the City Council and implemented, the overperformance in sales tax, and the CARES Act money. Those three helped us to perform better than expected in 2020.
Excellent. Thank you. Any further questions or discussion on this item? See none. With that, I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to receive and file the quarterly financial report for the year ended December 31st, 2020. Is there a second? Second. Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the votes. The result of 6-0, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Selection of candidate to fill vacancy in City Council District 3.
Excellent. So we're going to move into the selection of candidate. I will ask that Law would just give folks here and also those that perhaps are watching an overview of the process for us.
Yes, Jennifer McGonigan, City Attorney. By city ordinance, the process for selecting individual to fill this vacancy is set forth. the candidates have been narrowed down to 5 from the DAB selection process. Those 5 candidates are now before you. The council, by ordinance, will make a motion and a ballot, written ballot vote to select those, to select that individual at this point. So,
Do you know off the top of your head which section of the ordinance this follows? Is this 210?
this is under 2.04.040.
And my understanding is that we will, each candidate will present themselves in alphabetical order, have 3 minutes to address the council, and then we will begin the balloting.
That process of them presenting yourself and the 3 minutes is set by you and staff. The balloting then is set by ordinance. So that's the process that's been followed, and I believe that's what's planned.
Excellent. With that, we will begin the process. And again, we are recognizing the top 5 candidates in the order, in alphabetical order. So with that, we will start with Jared Sorello. Jared, we'd ask you to come to the front, address the council. You have 3 minutes. Of course, I won't cut you off mid-sentence, so please be as close to 3 minutes as possible.
Have to keep the mask on?
Yes. We're trying to keep Bob safe.
Understood. Thank you, Mayor Whipple, council members, city manager, and staff. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today. I'd also like to thank all of the other candidates who stepped up during this time of need for our city and our district. My name is Jared Sorello, and I come before you today to ask for your support. I'm truly humbled and honored to even be considered for this seat. Wichita is my hometown. I have lived on the south side since the day my mother brought me home from the hospital, Wesley Medical Center. So it is with gratitude and a sense of responsibility and purpose that I seek to serve the residents of District 3. I believe that to be an effective council member, you must be willing to work hard and work together, working with people you might not always agree with. As a broadcast journalist for more than 25 years, I learned that if you want to learn about your community, you need to listen to its residents. One of the most important skills that journalism has taught me is to see both sides of a story and form an educated view of that story. Please allow me to use those same skills to help build a better District 3 in Wichita. Like many other people in this community, I lost my job a few years ago. It was a job I loved and I had hoped to remain in for my entire career. But like so many others, destiny had other plans. I tell you this story because losing my job wasn't quite so bad as it turned out to be. At the time, I thought it was the end of the world. I lost my job at one of the lowest points of my life, just 3 months after my mother became permanently disabled from emergency brain tumor surgery. It was an honor and a privilege to be able to have the time to help my father take care of her for the last 8 long years of her life. Unfortunately, my mother passed away a little more than a year ago. She fought hard against that tumor, and I will fight hard every day for Wichita. With the unprecedented amount of development going on for the past decade, I believe people are excited about Wichita and its ability to live, work, and play. Wichita is a city on the cusp of greatness. In order to achieve that greatness, we must commit ourselves to create a culture of unity and shared opportunities. And when it comes to that commitment, I will be all in. I'm all in for supporting our small businesses and improving our relationships with our large employers in the city. I'm all in for continuing to work toward fostering new and existing partnerships with city staff and community leaders. And I'm all in for making sure we support and provide world-class education to our students who are looking to go to college, or even if you're an adult looking to jumpstart a new career because of recent layoffs. I want to help expand our bipartisan relationships with our state representatives to get a bigger portion of the pie so we can help our city keep functioning better. I want to help get our residents walkability and help increase our community programs, maintaining our core services, including police and fire. So in closing, I stand before you today to ask for your support. Please allow me to join you in partnership to lead this great city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next person we will hear from is Miss Cindy Miles.
Well, thank you all very much for this opportunity. You know, I prepared several speeches over the past couple of weeks. I've gone through speeches in my head. And when it came down to it this morning, I decided what I really needed to do was just speak from the heart. And so today I speak to you from my heart. I moved to Wichita almost about 20 years ago. My husband had grown up here, and he had grown up on the south side. He graduated from South High. He went to school at Truesdale. And so when we came here, of course, we came to the south side and District 3. And I, being the community volunteer that I am, immediately got involved in issues in this community. And it was issues related to child abuse and neglect, domestic violence, trying to figure out how do we fight crime better, mental health and substance abuse, homelessness, poverty, and any other issue that I could find that I felt like we really needed to address and we weren't addressing well. I learned to become an advocate for those people that were related to the issues that I was involved in. So when I got a chance in 2012 to serve on the committee to develop a 20-year plan for the city and county, I was elated because this was an opportunity to address issues in different ways. And as I did that work and I learned more about how we plan for the development of our city and our county, as I learned about the issues that we face, whether it's mass transit or being behind in the maintenance of our streets and roads or bridges, and as I heard from the people in the community talk about the things that they felt like were important, I became more and more passionate about how I could be involved in implementing this plan and other things in this great city. And I went on to make the commitment that one day I wanted to run for this seat. I've spent 8 years doing preparation, serving on the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, serving on the South Central Neighborhood Planning, serving on the Delano District Planning, looking at how do we transform Clapp Park. I've looked at a wide variety of issues, a diversity of issues, because I think somebody that's going to serve in this seat needs to have that. So I've told you about myself, and probably most of you know about me from the work that I've done in the community, but I want to spend my last minute, I think I have a minute, talking about District 3. So I am challenging you today to do what's best for District 3 and the city, to pick a candidate, whether it's myself or somebody else, that has lived in the district for a period of time, that has been involved and has been engaged, that has served in that district and served the city on a wide variety of issues. I am asking you to think about some of the people that have passionately served the district, like George Theo Harris or Hoyt Hillman. I want somebody to know the history of why South Fork didn't succeed and what we can do to make it succeed. I want somebody that knows the challenges that we faced on the Broadway corridor and the other challenges that we faced in the district. I want them to know what Adam Barlow Thomas is doing with SoC Light. So that's my challenge to you today. Again, I appreciate the time to speak in front of you today. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those, if we are wrapping up a thought when minute 3 comes in, I'll probably give you a signal and try not to interrupt that last thought because I want to give everyone the benefit of completing their sentence. So if you see me tap my watch, that's what I'm doing. Also, there is a timer on the bottom as well. Next person on the list we have is Mr. Virgil H. Miller, Jr.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city manager, city staff, and members of our community. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Virgil H. Miller Jr. I'm a married father of 3, grandfather of 6. I retired from the Wichita Police Department in October 2020 after 30 years of service to the city, and I have a desire to continue contributing to the city as a whole and the people of District 3 in particular. I grew up in South Wichita. A tree I planted as a 9 or 10-year-old still grows in the front yard of my childhood home. I walked to and from Gardner Elementary School, Hamilton Middle School, until my family moved to another neighborhood in South Wichita where I graduated from South High School. My first job was down south at a McDonald's where I worked the front counter and drive-through and discovered I enjoyed working with people, especially the regular customers. After the birth of my oldest child, I began to look for a job that would provide for my family. The factory job I had was not for me and reinforced the fact that I enjoyed working with people. I became a member of the Wichita Police Department in the summer of 1990. As a police officer, I was assigned to Patrol South and was pleased to work in the neighborhoods that I had grown up in and was raising my family in. I requested a position in community policing and found satisfaction in proactively addressing the concerns of the residents in those neighborhoods. I feel the people in the neighborhoods I was assigned appreciated my input and that I was there to help them with their problems and provide tools to reduce future issues in the same locations. The problems, just like the people, were and continue to be diverse. Many times the issues were not even a police issue, but people were counting on me to help them find a solution. Sometimes the problems were simply a matter of perspective. By encouraging neighbors to be neighborly and by facilitating conversations, I helped the people understand each other and eliminated those perceived issues. I retired from the department a few years sooner than I had originally planned. Though I had talked about running for city council for a few years prior to my retirement, I had not made the firm decision to do it until after my retirement, when I realized that the District 3 seat would be open in November of 21. Though I have already given more than 30 years of service to the people of South Wichita, I feel there is still much more I can give. I told many people while getting signatures for the petition for this appointment that you will not find my name on the internet for unethical behavior. I have always worked and behaved in a way to make my wife, children, and grandchildren proud. The people of South Wichita need a representative on the council that is willing to not just work for them, but with them. A person who has spent decades living with them and getting to know them. A person who shares their concerns, walks in their neighborhoods, shops at the same stores, and is approachable. The new council member doesn't need to be perfect, but does need to have a desire to do better, not just for himself and his family, but the district and city as a whole. This council needs to have a member who is willing to address the issues brought to him, as well as stand up and make sure the people of District 3 are being treated with equity. I believe I am the right person for this appointment and look forward to working with each of you in the future. Thank you.
Right on time. Thank you, sir. Next person on the list is Mr. Joseph Shepard. Welcome.
Thank you. Mayor and council members, good morning. I humbly stand before you today grateful to have been one of many to make it this far in the process. I would like to pause to express my sincere gratitude to the residents of District 3, the District 3 Advisory Board, and countless others who are responsible for me standing before you today. I do not stand here on my own, nor do I take this opportunity for granted. Representing District 3 and the city of Wichita in this capacity of city council, as I've come to learn throughout the past few months, is both an honor and a privilege that requires sacrifice. I'm ready to listen, learn, and act to create an even stronger Wichita in District 3 that we are all proud of. 11 years ago, becoming a resident of Wichita was not in my plans. However, after quickly experiencing the candor and care of the community, I decided to make Wichita my home. I would like to give back just a small portion of what this community has given to me, my village. While pursuing my MPA, I learned directly from city staff about the operations benefits, but more importantly, the challenges of local government. It is my sincere hope that educational knowledge, coupled with my work ethic, service on city boards, listening skills, desire to learn, and be a team player, I can work alongside each of you and the residents of District 3 to tackle the challenges and rise together as one unit. As I reached out to residents of the district and community partners to learn what they would like to see in a public servant, the words connector and servant leader emerged from the conversations. A servant leader is who I strive to be at my core, leading with grit, grace, and gratitude. I hope through our time together you've been able to see my heart and my commitment to do right by everyone, even when it may be uncomfortable. These are challenging times in our city, but my commitment to all those invested is that if given the opportunity, I will work hard for District 3 and with the council to the best of my ability. Having overseen a $9.2 million budget used to fund operations and departments, I've experienced what it's like to make tough choices during years there was a shortfall. My first job out of college granted me the opportunity to work alongside companies across the state, both in the public and private sector, to help make progress on adaptive challenges. And in my current role, I've had the privilege of working with internal and external partners to lay the foundation of my area, moving it from a one-person team to a three-person team and generating additional revenue and income to carry out our strategic plan. I humbly believe my work is not done, and I can learn much more from serving in this position while utilizing professional experiences to serve the people and the city that I love to call home at a different level. I conclude this morning thanking each of you for your time, the people of District 3, city staff, Wichita, and for their support throughout this process. I wish you all the best of luck as you cast your vote for the individual who have the honor of representing this people-powered district. Thank you.
Thank you. Last on the list is Mr. George Theo Harris. Welcome and good morning.
What's that, sir?
Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City Legal. Good morning. My name is George Theo Harris. I am an Air Force veteran, a retired Boeing employee, and I have a degree from WSU in marketing. I have lived in District 3 for the past 42 years. I have been actively involved in my neighborhood. I currently serve as the president of 3 neighborhood associations. I have been a board member of Grandview Heights the past 22 years and a board member for me the past 8 years. I have helped with or led 30-plus cleanups during that time. In addition, I have served on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board the last 6.5 years and attended every Animal Service Advisory Board meeting since its inception in July of 2015, also serving on the Dangerous Dog Subcommittee. I've worked with Wichita Independent Neighborhoods for many years, where I worked in collaboration with a diverse group of Wichitans. I know most of the department heads of the city, as well as the chiefs of police and fire, and all will tell you of my great passion. I plan on having great dialogue and working relationships with the mayor and the other city councilors. I have a good working relationship with the county manager and look forward to working with county elected officials and staff as needed. I have worked with our state legislators of both parties to solve neighborhood problems, to include help from the DA. I made a point to get to know and work with the people that can solve problems. If I cannot help someone directly, I find out who can and let them get to a successful resolution. I will be a full-time councilman. I am retired and will devote as much time as needed to get this job done right. My wife is a retired registered nurse in healthcare knowledge, who has maintained her license and will work by my side. So you are getting a 2 for the price of 1. We will be a team for District 3 in the city of Wichita. As a member of council, I will focus my efforts in 4 areas. Number 1, public safety is a major issue in the neighborhoods, including property crimes like burglary and car theft, and I am a strong supporter of community policing. 2, partnering to rebuild Wichita's economy after the effects of COVID, putting people back to work and getting businesses open safely, and also finding other business and manufacturing opportunities. 3, neighborhood issues such as neighboring movements started in South Central, code enforcement, animal service concerns, and bike paths and trails. 4, education, as in getting the word out, what a city councilor person can do in keeping citizens very engaged with monthly reports on what the advisory boards are discussing and bi-monthly reports on Clap Park. I'm here to serve. I can think outside the box, and people say I am a problem solver, big and small. I will bring these talents to all of District 3 and the city of Wichita. Thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you. That concludes our list of candidates. I will just remind the council and the public the process in which we will have a written ballot. Each council member has 5 ballots. If we were to not have a majority or a council majority of 4 votes is what the next member will need, not just a majority of ballots, but a majority of the council in total. If we don't receive that by these 5 votes, then this will automatically go on to the next meeting. And then if at that meeting, throughout 5 rounds, we don't have a winner, we will go to the next meeting. If that continues, then I believe a coin will be flipped to determine the winner. So that's the process, as my understanding. I'll look to legal if I've made anything unclear. And that's how this will go. So we will ask council members to identify on their ballot, on ballot 1, who their choice is, to sign their ballot. And I believe we'll put it up here so the clerk can receive it and then read it out loud.
Mayor, are you ready for the
Yes, ma'am.
results?
Clerk will read.
Councilmember Claycomb voted for Cindy Miles. Councilmember Brian Fry voted for Jared Sorello. Councilmember Jeff Blueball voted for Jared Sorello. Councilmember Tuttle voted for Jared Sorello. Vice Mayor Johnson voted for Joseph Shepard, and Mayor Whipple voted for Joseph Shepard.
It seems that neither candidate has received the 4 necessary to advance, therefore, or to be appointed, therefore we will go on to round 2. Members will pick up their ballot for round 2, and they will again select a member. Clerk will read the ballots for round 2.
The results of ballot 2. Councilmember Claycomb voted for Cindy Miles. Councilmember Fry voted for Jared Sorello. Councilmember Blueball voted for Jared Sorello. Councilmember Tuttle voted for Jared Sorello. Vice Mayor Johnson voted for Joseph Shepard. And Mayor Whipple voted for Joseph Shepard.
It seems no one has the necessary 4 votes. Therefore, we will move to round 3.
Mayor, the results of ballot 3. Councilmember Claycomb voted for Cindy Miles. Councilmember Fry voted for Jared Sorello. Councilmember Blueball voted for Jared Sorello. Councilmember Tuttle voted for Jared Sorello. Vice Mayor Johnson voted for Joseph Shepard. And Mayor Whipple voted for Joseph Shepard.
We're at on to round 4. Clerk will read.
Results of ballot 4. Councilmember Claycomb voted for Cindy Miles. Councilmember Fry voted for Jared Cirillo. Councilmember Blueball voted for Jared Cirillo. Councilmember Tuttle voted for Jared Cirillo. Vice Mayor Johnson voted for Joseph Shepard. And Mayor Whipple voted for Joseph Shepard.
For the last round for this meeting, ballot 5. Clerk will read.
Results of ballot 5. Councilmember Claycomb voted for Cindy Miles. Councilmember Fry voted for Jared Cirillo. Councilmember Blueball voted for Jared Cirillo. Councilmember Tuttle voted for Jared Cirillo. Vice Mayor Johnson voted for Joseph Shepard. And Mayor Whipple voted for Joseph Shepard.
That will conclude the 5 rounds. Therefore, let the record, or let the minutes show that we will be moving the next 5 rounds of voting to the next meeting.
Yes.
Madam Clerk.
Councilmember,
I should make it clear, the 5 rounds have concluded with no clear winner. Therefore, according to our ordinance, the next 5 rounds of voting will happen, or up to 5 rounds will happen at the next meeting. Seems Councilman Bluebog would like the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. What happens in the event of a 3-way tie? I don't know how we resolve that with a coin toss. Is it going to be best 2 out of 3 or something?
Councilmember, the ordinance does not address that.
Okay.
We'll look into that option.
Or find a 3-sided coin.
Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to be clear, our next meeting would be March 16th, since we do not have one next week. So, okay, thank you.
Exactly, thank you for that. The ordinance states the next scheduled meeting, therefore it won't be next week, it'll be March 16th. Thank you for the clarification. Further discussion?
Through the election.
See none. Let's go ahead and go to the next item on the agenda, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember appointments and comments.
Are there any appointments to boards that we could knock out of the way first? Councilmember Claycomb?
Thank you. I have reappointments and appointments. So reappointing DAB members Sean Rojas, Bill Washburn, James Deckard, Sergio Devara Najara, Melinda Kellogg, Linda Matney, Scott Lucas, Angela Martinez, Yesela Pena, and youth member Elena Welch. And District 6 DAB appointments, Zach Gingrich Gaylord and Mark Baker, and District 6 MAPC appointment, Deborah Foster.
Are there other appointments we want to add to this list for an overall motion? Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to appoint Leslie Davis to the District 1 Advisory Board.
Are there any other appointments? I'll make a motion to accept the appointments. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk, open the roll. Members cast the votes. result of 6 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Members are appointed. Back on announcements and comments. Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to thank a couple of people. Gabriel Fonseca served on the District 1 Advisory Board for a number of months, but he has since moved to District 2. I want to thank him for his service. He has stepped down, as well as Aaron Mays, who started off on District 2's advisory board. Then there was redistricting, so he then lived in District 1 and served on the District 1 advisory board and has termed out and found that out yesterday. So I want to thank him for his service and all his years and helping us out.
Other announcements. I'll make one. We have for those who are watching, we do have a workshop today at 12:30 p.m. To go over the NLC's Code of Ethics recommendations and response to our Code of Ethics. So that will be happening here at 12:30 for those interested in tuning in. Are there any other announcements? If none, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the votes. The result of 6 yeas to 0 nays, that motion does pass. We are now adjourned. Thank you all.
We just trade back and forth. You know, those in the tell you about traffic.